Losing Touch with Reality. It's my second book in my series, Life Beyond Silence. My first book was Not a Victim, a Survivor, and I finished that podcast not long ago. This is the second podcast based on the second book in this series, Losing Touch with Reality. So, as I previously said in the other episode, I had split from Phil. He had left me and he took everything while I was at work, and then when I got home, his stuff was gone. It took me 2 weeks to find him, and then he offered to, take my belongings anywhere I wanted to go. So I had moved to Michigan. That didn't work out. I moved back to Alabama, and then my dad had offered to help me get to Murray, Kentucky. So in the last episode, I left you as we had just gotten to Murray, Kentucky, and pretty much I had accepted that Phil had thrown me another curveball. I think what's the most hardest part of that is he had done so much to ruin everything for us. And by me leaving my oldest daughter and going to Louisiana to be with him, I had burnt bridges that I just couldn't repair. And then here, a whole decade after what had previously gone on, well, I won't say decade. It had been, my son had been like 2 when he had blown everything up in Kentucky by his behavior. And at this point, my son was almost 10, and we had now gotten to Murray, Kentucky. And yes, we'd gotten a divorce a while back, and so there was nothing that he had to do to move on with his life. And like I said in the previous episode, I think he just didn't want to pay bills, have responsibilities, have kids. I think he missed having a life outside of the norm. He wanted to be back where he could go places and be seen and be welcomed by crowds of people. I don't know if that ever happened for him, but being with the woman that he's with, who never had children, I'm sure they could go out. I'm sure they could go to places. And it seems as though, just from what my son has told me, that's kind of the life they've led. So when we got to Kentucky, yes, I was still heartbroken, but I was trying to pick everything up and take care of my kids and find a job, and I did really, really quickly. I went back to nursing. I was back at a hospital. I was doing nursing care, and I picked night shift because it gave me the best pay. That's the way it is in all nursing jobs. If you pick night shift or off hours, like every weekend or things like that, you'll get better pay than if you were like days Monday through Friday, which seems totally off balance in some ways because patients don't really need you as much as at night. They usually, some of them will get woken up from meds during the night, but most of them usually just get vital checks and they sleep, and occasionally there'll be something that'll happen, but most of the time it's pretty um, minor during night shift compared to day shift when everything is so busy. Anyway, um, so online dating had really started to take off. This was back in like 99, 2000. And I had a computer and I got online and, you know, basically being the new girl in a town. And then Murray's not a big town, it's a college town, which at the time I was definitely not college age. I was, let's say, 40. So, no, that um, was not my crowd. So, and going out plus working, having children, it just wasn't really a thing either. So I got to talking to different people online, and I was really interested in, this person or that person, and I was still trying to somehow find Mr. Right, that knight in shining armor that would come out of the woodwork and I guess give me happiness and security and all the things that you're looking for if you're um, heartbroken. But I would not suggest online dating for that. But I did go out with a few people. But one day, as I was driving around doing who knows what, I found a billiards place, and or a pool place, but basically billiards is what it's called. And I've always played pool. I've always enjoyed it. I'm not the best player, but I'm not the worst either. And for a girl, I guess I play pretty good. So I went in there, and it was pretty large, and pretty kind of like a place where you could be a local regular, I guess you would say. And so I started going there, playing a few games, and they had like a snack kind of fast food place. They could, fix burgers, fries, um, mozzarella sticks, things like that, and chicken strips, things like that. So I would go there and like eat lunch, play a couple games, and then later on go to work. But my kids were either going to school or out roaming the neighborhood. My middle daughter was in college and she was working, so she was quite busy herself. And then my youngest daughter was somewhere around like 13, 14. And then my son, like I said, was going on 10 when we first got there. So eventually I met a I met a guy there. He was sitting at the bar, and he actually It wasn't really a bar. It was like just a bar that you would sit at to eat your fast food. But they had no drinking there. But I was playing pool and I noticed him. He was a good looking guy. He was 5 years younger than me. And, he had some tattoos and he was friendly. And I found out quickly that he was also kin to the owner of the billiard place. And so I got to know him, and he was really nice. Um, he was kind of shady a little bit. Um, I made comments about the different tattoos he had, and he made comments back. I remember I was kind of taken back when I learned that he had been in jail because, of course, I don't need any more drama in my life. But he didn't tell me the whole story, and I truthfully didn't ask. I didn't think it would amount to anything other than just going out and having a little fun. But so anyway, I get involved with this guy, and then I learn he's actually in Kentucky, that he jumped his probation um, and came back to his old stomping grounds in Kentucky, which led to him being picked up. That was a whole big incident because, like I said, I was totally clueless as to exactly what was going on with him. But um, I won't say that I was completely blind, because he had told me that when he got caught, he would end up being transferred back to Michigan to finish out his uh, time in prison. And I'm like, what? So, I figured that's it for him. He's got picked up pretty quickly, and um, he went back to Michigan. But that issue of me making bad choices had reared its ugly head again, and here I was actually somewhat connected to him, and he started writing me from prison, and I I don't think I wrote him very much. I think mainly that was never my thing, to write letters. But I listened to what he had to say, and I enjoyed getting the mail, even though I learned quickly that prisoners will send like love notes and cards to just about anybody. And they do that because they're hoping in some way you'll answer their phone calls, or in some way you'll send them money so they can apply it to snacks and things that they get from the commissary. Um, I learned a lot because he sent letters all the time, which I guess if I was in prison and that's the only thing you have is a way of reaching out and begging for any money or any contact you can get, I guess I would do it too. But needless to say, like I said, I don't think I wrote very much to him. And I know I didn't send him any money. I told him that I didn't have it. I had kids to take care of, and I just didn't have it. But I did get to know some of his family, and, you know, I guess you could say at one point he got out, and his grandmother drove all the way to Michigan to pick him up because he got his transfer probation to apply to Kentucky. So he did it the right way this time. So he ends up in Kentucky, and he ends up back dating me. And he, you know, the only thing I can say is stupid is as stupid does, and basically, I was a complete idiot. I didn't know I didn't know anything about drugs or criminals or probation or prison even. I didn't know anything about any of that life. I'd never been around it. I mean, you've listened to my podcast. All I had ever done was jump from man to man, and yeah, I had been with alcoholics. I had been with my abuser who was a drug addict, but I didn't know any real street drugs. I I knew that my abuser with my domestic violence did prescription drugs, and he even shot them up, but he never like taught me anything, and neither did I ever want to know anything about drugs. And plus, my children, up until meeting this guy, they had been too young to have any knowledge of any of that either. But once I had met him and um, gotten involved with him, you know, it's not that I thought he was the right person. It's not that I thought he was my soulmate or the person that was going to be a good match. Um, I just was so heartbroken that I was eager to have someone show me attention. And I think Steve, which was his name, I think he was at times decent, but then his background with, I guess you would say, criminal influence, kept rearing its ugly head. And I kept telling him that's not going to be a part of my life. And we went round and round quite a bit. But, I don't really know what happened at first. I think, I know he had gotten picked up again, but I couldn't really tell you exactly why. Um, I know I actually did um, witness him being taken into custody once. And I also witnessed a lot more of his criminal aspect, but I wasn't a part of it. And I, I think pretty much I just stood back and kind of took it all in. So I was back quickly to online dating, and I meet this guy who, um, believe it or not, his name was Phil also. And um, I was not really um, looking for a live-in companion or anything like that because I had my kids and I worked. I was just looking for a nice guy. And so this guy had messaged me and he said he was going to be in my area. Could I come and meet him? And we had been talking for a little bit, and I said, yeah, sure. So when I actually went to meet him and he actually came back to where I live, we had hit it off, but he kind of told me he was stranded. And I was like, what? You're stranded at my house? How are you stranded? And he's like, well, he was between going from one place to another, and when I came to meet him, he'd just gotten dropped off, but they weren't coming back. And I was like, no, you can't stay here. I have 2 children and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and you can't be here. And all of that really upset the balance between my kids and me. And yes, I was taken with him again. Here I go from one person to another. And to be honest, I don't have any answers for that. I don't. That's just more mistakes. Just add them all up. I don't know why I was in such a kind of like blindness to find somebody that would give me security or give me happiness. I don't know why I was that way. I don't. Other than I think when you're in a domestic violence relationship and you're so broken, you're like a shell of a person and you lose all ability to think of yourself as being deserving. You just you really are broken. And I think it all kind of stemmed back from my domestic violence incident. I think being with my second husband, who constantly made me walk on eggshells, it took away my self-worth. I just felt as though I wasn't worthy, that I was broken, that every other man could tell me what to do. And I don't like that about domestic violence. I don't like that it strips away who you are as a person. I really can't even put that into words. But I was in a pit of hell I had been for years. And then Phil leaving the way he did and breaking my heart, and also I think Phil just took away every other little piece of me that my second husband didn't. And so there I was, a shell of a person. And I think being with a criminal, trying to find happiness, is definitely looking in the wrong place. I think trying to find happiness online is also looking in the wrong place. I think the mistakes I did were obvious to anybody else in this world except for me. I think I was clueless that, I mean, because you got to think, I had 4 children by this time. One of them, yes, was staying at my mom's by then, but the other 3 were with me. And my middle daughter had started going to college, and she had pretty much moved out, or she definitely did move out after I met my online Romeo, I guess you would call him. But yeah, I think the bad mistakes that I kept making once I got to Murray were basically just things I should have definitely seen. But I was clueless as to realizing that here I am, 40 years old, with 3 children that are still with me, and I'm not a young girl anymore. And so the attention that I would get from a criminal or from an online Romeo kind of user made my head turn and made me desperately want that. But yeah, I got way more than I bargained for. Um, Steve was too much of a criminal. Um, he was definitely going to end back up in prison. And he was definitely in the criminal activity thing. And like I said, I was not skilled in that at all. And here my children were, I guess, around that. So it wasn't, or shouldn't have been, a surprise that my daughter, my youngest daughter, had started to rebel and take upon some criminal activity of her own. And, you know, no, I really, to this day, would tell you I was stupid. I was stupid to have anybody like that around me or around my kids. I was stupid when my daughter first started going out and being with her own crowd that was pushing her into things. And I can't tell you how that all started. That would be her story. But I can tell you that when she started rebelling, I couldn't really get a handle on it. I ended up talking to like the juvie people about the fact that I couldn't control her. My daughter and my son both had, especially my daughter, had become, uh, I forget what they call it, but when you don't go to school, um, they were just, they would go to, like I would be working and then I'd get home and I'd go to bed, and wouldn't, they might go to school, but they wouldn't stay at school. And their grades were falling, especially my daughter. And at one time, she didn't want to come home from somebody's house that she'd gone to stay the night with. And I didn't know where they lived. All I knew is I couldn't control her. So yeah, I was just stupid. And I thought, um, because the police had told me that if I ever needed them in that way, that I should file some kind of report saying basically that, um, you know, you need help to get your teenager under control. And I'd already been to court, because of the fact that they were, especially my daughter, was not going to school. And I started getting aware of the delinquency, um, juvie side of the court system, which I had never ever been a part of up to then, because my oldest daughter never did anything wrong. My middle daughter was not that kind of person. She wanted to go to college like her oldest sister, and she wanted to be in fashion, and here I was with my youngest daughter who was acting out, or at least that's the way I felt about it. It was, a lot of it was acting out. And when they first got involved, I guess I thought some way you can get the help that you need as a parent, and it would get her back on track. But that's not how the juvenile system works. Unfortunately, the juvenile system, once they have their hooks into you, they literally can, it's kind of like snowballing. It's like one minute they can say, this is going on with the school, you know, we need her to do this, this, and if she doesn't, then we'll fine you as a parent because she's not getting her grades, or she's not going to class like she's supposed to graduate. And but it doesn't just stay outside of, the inner workings of juvie. She ended up getting caught a few times with different, things, and I could not tell you word for word what happened. Number one, it's her story to tell, but number two, my innocence in the whole thing, by trying to tell them she's not coming home. I called, I begged, I pleaded. She's not doing what she's supposed to do as a kid, and I'm doing my best here. I need some help. My innocence in it started relatively simple, but it just snowballs when your child is put in the juvie system. They keep your child in the juvie system, They do not let her out of the juvie system until she is 18. So she may be out, but she's kind of being managed by the juvenile court system. So you're always going to have checkups, basically. And the judge is always looking for the next thing that your child is doing. And for punishment, um, they send them to juvie. And it's kind of like a miniature jail. It's it's very much like a jail. It's just for children. And once you go in the system, you can get out. But then the next thing that happens, you're sent back. Then you're sent back longer. Then you're sent back more. And before you know it, she went from being like 14 and having run-ins with the juvie system to being like 18 and having been there several months.